chest bra.
My name's Rendi, and with the goal for the lowest combat level in mind, I welcome you back to my series.
Lower, the better.
Before I start today's episode, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for your support over the last few months here on YouTube, because I found out that I got nominated in not one, but 2 categories for the Golden Gnome Awards. Just getting the nomination in these categories means a whole lot to me because I've actually been striving to get recognized by Jagex within video making and RuneScape since I started this channel all the way back in 2006. And because this is the first year that Jagex made this competition actually decided by the popular vote, that means we're going on a full-on political campaign. I've also been hearing just a few people say that the fire kit video might be the greatest achievement, but not the best video. Well, in fact, I actually almost spent more time editing cinematics in this video and the whole video itself than I spent perfecting the fight cave grind. So in all reality, give the video a chance and I'll link it in the description below along with the poll.
If you vote for me, all of your wildest dreams will come true.
And also, basically, if I win 1 Golden Gnome, Chessbro will do a face reveal. And if somehow I win 2, which won't happen because it never has, well, I'll get Chessbro's name tattooed on my chest. To start off, I'm really excited to get into this episode because it will be showcasing some very unorthodox methods, as well as some real creativity in going through the journey of this entire quest. First off, do you guys remember that one Australian I shouted out who was on the Venge Please team from my Mage Arena episode in this series? Well, he's actually not Australian. He's from New Zealand, and I owe him a huge shout out along with Chessbra for helping me get the skill requirements up for this quest by release. The skill requirements for this quest are huge, and those alone took over 100 hours even with their help. As well, I had to get all of the massive quest requirements done for this quest, which you can see me do in the previous episode on Good Morning. I'll link that episode in the description below. And even besides that huge quest line required for Mornings in Part 2, I still had to do a couple more, being Making History, and the requirement for that being Priest in Peril. And although the Making History quest guide says Restless Ghost is needed to complete the quest, we actually found out that you can just use the amulet without completing the quest, therefore avoiding some extra prayer XP and levels. Therefore, after all the quest rewards and requirements, you can see the bare minimum stats I had to start Song of the Elves with here. So after all those extremely tedious requirements, I finally was able to start the quest and go from here. For one of the first parts of the quest, I made something out of steel armor which actually had worse bonuses than steel armor itself. So because I was doing the majority of this quest on the first day of release, I didn't look ahead in the guide, and I basically just strategized to use every method I knew possible in order to minimize my XP during every part of this quest. And the first time I would actually have to utilize the idea of minimizing my XP in combat within this quest was the raid on the Mourners. Now there are 3 instances of these raids, and the first here is the easiest, where I only have to kill 10 Mourners and very few of them are high levels. But I actually won't be having to kill any of these Mourners at all. That is because my allied NPCs, besides the level 30s, will all be able to heal their HP every time it goes under about 1/4 of their HP bar and never die. Now I thought I could maybe speed up the last room since it is by far the longest, being an hour completion time if you're just waiting on your allies to kill the enemies. But come to find out, you can't set up a cannon in this area, or any of them at all. Now another problem I would have is my allies would get stuck behind one another, and I would have to go inside their body to make themselves transparent, so they could go ahead and double or triple team one of the enemies. Finally, after about 2 hours of waiting out damage, I could move on to the next step in the quest. Belly bra. And on a last note for the starter portion of this quest, in these areas with the raids on the Mourners, it's actually instanced, and you can see that fires and barricades are blocking your way out of the very specific instanced area. Therefore, the area you can access within this instance is much smaller than the instance itself, as you can zoom out and tell easily that way. Now, most of the doors and ladders were either non-openable or removed entirely out of the sides of this instance, even though it mimics the real-life West Arty. But if you actually found a way to get past these barricades or doors that didn't open and climbed up some of these stairs, you would actually have a feasible way to path into a newly coordinated location and someone else's instance entirely. That is because a wide theory in bug abuse is if there's any staircase going up in an instance that doesn't have regularly coordinated locations into a new instance, it will actually just go ahead and go into someone else's instance which already exists. So after doing my best to avoid EXP in the first instances I would come across in this quest, I then had to go about some puzzles. The first being a very easy one I did within the Waterfall Dungeon, and the second of course being the light puzzle, which took quite a while. Even though this puzzle was a lot longer, it was a lot easier because there was no NPCs attacking me the entire time, and I wouldn't have to be wasting sweets. As well, this quest also has handhelds like the Morning's End Part 2 quest, like I showed in the last episode, and once again, guess what? We got them both each under 2 tries.
Blessed by the chest.
Also, by the way, I definitely did find these handhelds within the first few seconds of being in the area. So this will definitely be the longest portion of the video because there's so many sub-bosses and NPCs within this quest which I have to minimize my combat XP so I can make sure I stay a low combat level. So because I hadn't read any of the quest dialogue, I actually was surprised when I was on my way to the first set of NPCs I would have to fight, and that's because the elves in the elf camp apparently are now aggressive. So I have to get to this chest, and the only way in doing that is killing these NPCs. As you can already see, these NPCs spawn in the same locations because they're in an instance, and I'm going to utilize that to my advantage by going around the range and then making sure the melee is trapped behind the range so I can deal with only the range first. Now since I'm trying to minimize my EXP as much as possible for each of these steps, I'm going to go ahead and just recoil down both of these NPCs and not even bother with the cannon because I don't want range XP in case I need it later on. So I'm going to be using my purple sweets and recoils for this one, and I'm going to stand back from the range to get more clearance for an extra tick to tick eat their range attack in case of lag. And because these NPCs are in an instance and I don't need their drops, I most likely won't have to do physical damage to them in order to access that chest. After the range is dead, I'm gonna go ahead and lure the melee over to the only safe spot in the entire cave and utilize that safe spot to eat over his max hit. But at the same time, I'll be using my summer pies and brews to make sure I step out frequently enough to combat his 2x health regen rate, considering he has 100 health and is a very high level NPC. But come to find out, 250 sweets wasn't even enough to kill 2 of the lowest level NPCs in this entire quest, and therefore I would have to come back with more. Fortunately, this time I had enough sweets, and I was able to open the chest with only neutral damage being done to these NPCs. Chest raw! Okay, those 2 NPCs weren't even really considered bosses within this quest, but the next one definitely is. Straight out of this cutscene, the boss fight begins, but I would log out because I wasn't properly prepared. Once again, I'm trying to minimize the EXP, so I'm going to be utilizing recoils and sweets to do all of the damage on this boss, and I won't have to do any physical damage because after you get this boss down to 10%, he'll teleport you out, therefore you don't actually have to kill the boss besides getting him down to that HP. The green arrows he shoots are his normal attack, the red arrows are bombs which you must dodge a tick before they hit the floor, and the purple arrows deactivate your prayer if it's activated, but I have 14 prayer, so obviously this won't be the case, but as well, this actually hits 1 tick faster meaning my tick heat has to be dead on for these attacks. So the red arrow shots you can't actually tick heat, but I'm going to be tick eating every hit because I only have that small window of clearance, but as well I'll be moving out of the way of the red arrow shot if I identify that color whenever he is firing. So this boss has a double HP regen rate and 300 HP, and therefore this boss is going to take about 45 minutes to tick eat properly with no lag. So I was so focused with this boss, I totally forgot about the 10% health thing and that this was actually supposed to happen, and almost panicked. Now the next part of this quest I'll be covering is probably the most difficult part besides the final boss. Now what made this instance so difficult was that I had to protect a barricade for 4 minutes, and at the same time I would not have prayer and very low HP, so I could not aggress too many NPCs as I also had limited food and I wouldn't be able to out-eat them. As well, I didn't want to kill any of these NPCs to reposition them because that would be unnecessary combat XP and could boost me up to the next level later in the quest. Chest bra. Luckily we had Chespra doing the quest in a different world alongside us, so he was up to this same part, and I was allowed to use his ult in order to test this entire instance. In my testing, I found out that a lot of this instance is purely random, and that is because the NPCs can start firing at the barricade at any time and totally switch aggression off of you. But the one thing that held true and that wasn't random was the initial NPC spawns on both the allies helping me fight the elves and the elf spawns themselves. The only other part of this instance that wasn't purely random was actually that you could attack the archer NPCs on the elven side and they would go ahead and take one step closer to you every time you were to attack them. So to reduce the amount of HP on the barricade, the most optimal route is to take every NPC off of it, but I can't do that because I can't take that many hits without running out of food. So for the first 2 minutes of this, I'm going to try and just get one of the archers on the barricade and no others. And once again, a lot of randomness applies to this, and there is a possibility that 2 archers instead of 1 will start attacking the barricade at the start of the instance. Therefore, if I see the archer on the eastern side at the beginning of the instance start attacking the barricade, I'll go ahead and just leave. From here, if I only see 1 archer attacking, I'll go ahead and grab aggro on 2 melee NPCs that would otherwise be headed towards the barricade, then go north. From here, I would use a fast firing but also somewhat long range of a ranged weapon in order to attack the archer a few times, then drag him over to this exact tile because he will take 1 step every time I attack him towards my character. And from here, I'll run east, but avoiding going in the body of the allied NPC, and I'll also make sure I don't run through his body so I won't make him transparent, therefore allowing me to trap the 2 melee NPCs to the eastern side of this ally and the elf he is fighting, as well as the range so far back that I'm not inside of his actual attack range. Another problem is the randomness inside this instance also relies on the allies and the enemies themselves not dying too frequently, because once they die they will respawn and go and attack the barricade instead of an allied NPC. So if around 2.5 minutes has passed and the HP of the barricade looks pretty good, and the range NPC hasn't done too much damage to it, the other NPCs haven't died off and respawned and attacked the barricade, then I'll go ahead and proceed on and try to tag some of the NPCs that start aggressing the barricade once they respawn. So here's how this played out on my first attempt on the real account.
Looks like you're fucked. This really pisses me off.
Panic Eat.
That's right, 3 HP, barricade almost dead, but of course, we got it. Now for the last boss before I actually have to take on the real boss. Well, because this is the first day of the release, not even this NPC had its stats up yet on the wiki, therefore I used the lunar spell on Junior Chestbra in order to see just what he was immune to and what stats he had. Unfortunately, this NPC was immune to both poison, venom, and even a cannon. But this thing isn't immune to recoils, and therefore I had the great idea to tick eat melee. Yes, tick eating melee is possible under some variables. Now melee and other damage in the game is traditionally calculated as soon as it hits you, so you don't even have a tick of clearance to tick eat it like you do with projectile attacks from other NPCs. But melee damage and other damage can be ticketable in most cases, just like I was able to do it on the leaf traps in the Regicide quest in the previous episode. Now to perform this, I would need to find a stall I could use in combat, which I found out to be the Mind Shield switch, which would be a 2-tick stall. By queuing this stall along with 2 stackable interfaces on the prayer tabs I couldn't use, all before the NPC is to attack me, I was able to stall the damage, make sure one of the interfaces closed but not the other, to give us just enough clearance to do 1 tick eat for each melee attack. So I would have to be performing this for nearly an hour perfectly, but unfortunately, come to find out, this wasn't even possible because this NPC doesn't stay on his 4-tick attack cycle the whole entire fight. Whenever this NPC throws his stun and then his range attack, the stun itself adds ticks onto his attack cycle, meaning his attack cycle wasn't consistent enough to use the Mind Shield strategy. So therefore, I deem this boss So there is one safe spot in this instance where I actually can melee flinch this NPC, and unfortunately it is immune to poison, so I will have to get the full EXP from this boss. So before taking on this boss, I found out I had the clearance to get up to 58 attack before leveling to combat, as long as I didn't get my HP up. So I went ahead and did the 2 Gnome quests for some attack XP and 40 attack to wield the Ogre Club, which has a massive crush bonus and a similar strength bonus to the Rune 2H. I also utilized the new Divine Potions to keep my stats boosted the whole time, and basically with the Ogre Club, as well as Rune Claw special attack and attack boost from this special attack, I took this NPC down relatively quickly, mitigating most EXP I would have gotten from its HP regen. So at this point, I had spent about 12 hours on the day of release getting up to the final boss of this quest. But I was in for a surprise, and this last boss would actually take me a whole nother 36 hours of testing before I was able to find out something that might be feasible in defeating the final boss, Serene. So currently I'm 40 combat, and designing a method to defeat this boss at anything even relatively close to that was probably one of the hardest tasks I've ever had to do in RuneScape when it comes down to theory crafting. And before I get into the specific details on the final method I used to defeat Serene, well, let's just say I want to cover what I actually had to research first, and all the obstacles I would have to overcome in order to find something that would work for this account build. Now, I went into the Serene boss fight blind, and therefore that's why I thought that this might be possible with one prayer. So I have very low stats, as well as my DPS is very low from these stats, and my HP is low. Meaning if I don't want to get prayer, I'm going to have to get very high stats in order to out DPS this boss, since it is 1000 HP. Also, this boss is not tiki-able. This is because it actually fires 2 shots one after another, meaning if you tiki the first, the second one will basically just overhit your HP and kill you. So I had one of 2 choices. I could either get my magic and HP level up to increase my DPS and kill this boss with low level prayer, or I could just get a few prayer levels, being 40 prayer, to protect range against Serene's damage and basically take a lot less damage overall. So the obvious choice was to just get 40 prayer so I could protect range and take a lot less damage, putting me at 43 combat from 40. Now if that's all I had to do, I would be happy, but unfortunately I still needed DPS even with this prayer and the reduced damage. So basically, even though I have Protect on, I'll be taking damage constantly from Serene, even though it's reduced. And purple sweets are pretty much irrelevant because there are no safe spots, and by the time I eat these purple sweets, Serene will have done equivalent damage to me, pretty much putting my HP at the same amount it would be with no DPS at all performed. So I had to figure out 2 things to defeat this boss. 1, I had to figure out how to heal myself more while in the instance of this boss fight, and 2, I had to figure out how to get more DPS on this boss. Well, for the aspect of DPS, as I said earlier, I did have the clearance to get 58 attack, and I already had 50 magic, and I already had Underground Pass done, so the obvious choice was to go to Gangsters and Zaya and get my attack to 50 with no HP levels, as well as get some range EXP from that gangster training method. After being able to equip the staff and use the spell, I also spent some of my range EXP at Horror from the Deep in order to get the Book of Darkness for extra prayer bonus and magic bonus for more DPS. All of these items, as well as some good mage bonus, would definitely help me in the DPS factor of this fight. Next, for utilizing my inventory, I basically tried almost everything in order to heal myself and to avoid as much damage as possible. Now, Serene's attacks goes through a 1-minute rotation, which has 4 special attacks inside of that 1 minute. Between each of these specials, Serene will attack you at least 3 times normally. So with my current defense level and gear, I'll be taking around 30 to 40 damage per 1 minute cycle, as well as another 30 to 35 damage for the special attack. Serene's very last special attack in the 1 minute cycle does 90 to 95% of your maximum HP as damage. Therefore, on average, I would be taking between 60 and 80 damage per 1 minute. Now my average DPS would be around 70 on Serene per 1 minute cycle, and this boss has 1000 HP, meaning I would be needing to last at least 14 minutes inside of this boss fight. So the first step I took was trying to mitigate the damage dealt to me in this entire rotation. To start theory crafting, I basically tried going in and out of its melee zone and avoiding some of the spike damage that way and less range damage overall even with the range protect on. But unfortunately, I found out that the switch between the melee and range attack even when you're in melee zone of this NPC is completely random. The last thing I looked into in mitigating damage dealt to my own character was basically trying to figure out a way around the special attack, which Serene does at the end of her cycle, that takes down about half the HP I would be taking per cycle in total. This is where my theory crafting was almost nearly exhausted, as I tried everything I had ever thought of in the entire game to mitigate this damage. To start, Serene's power shot can't be tick 8 normally, as the damage calculates on the fly. So I then tried the mind shield idea I was trying to use earlier in this video to stall the damage and then tick eat it. Being able to tick eat this damage would be massive, as I could sit a lower HP for the run and basically would save me half of my food. But unfortunately, I couldn't even do this either, and somehow the JMods actually somehow thought to not allow prayer interfaces to be flashed inside of the special attack of this NPC. So even though I could stall the damage, I couldn't interface stack, and therefore I wouldn't have any ticks to eat my food. I even tried using other stackable interfaces such as the aim and fire on the fixed device, but to my surprise, Jagex actually thought about this one step ahead, and you couldn't even use this option. Next, I tried the idea for using a Phoenix Necklace or Redemption in order to somewhat tick-eat this attack with a regeneration. Well, guess what? I couldn't eat a rock cake to trigger my Redemption or Phoenix Necklace during the special attack, and only during the special attack. I was allowed to use this rock cake in any other instance inside this boss fight, but unfortunately, Jagex even thought ahead on this one and totally killed this idea. But from here, I took it upon myself to take this one step further and try and figure out an item that could damage myself that I could also use during this special attack. And of course, I found one. Even though it wasn't completely stackable like a rock cake, it would still do a lot more for each inventory slot for overall healing power. That's right, I now wouldn't have to eat up to full for the end of the fight, meaning I wouldn't have to use as much food, and I would have more DPS, and I would get the extra natural HP regen from the Phoenix Necklace. This Phoenix Necklace and Zami Brew combo will allow me to almost double my time inside the instance, and allow me just enough time to hopefully get that RNG and that final kill for the boss. But still, after all of this, and even using Guthix Rest for healing power, it still wasn't enough to get the kill, and I needed more inventory for more Phoenix Necklaces to allow me to stay in the instance longer. By the way, all damage on this boss is scaled down to a max of 24, meaning my Iban's Blast hitting 25 max is just the perfect number for DPS. So how did I get enough inventory for more Phoenix Necklaces? Well, since I had the Phoenix Necklaces now, I didn't have to be a high HP at the end of the 1 minute cycle, meaning I could sit there for the first half of the cycle, eat to full HP with my purple sweets, and then go from there until the end of the cycle, where I would then be low enough to actually activate the Phoenix Necklace. Sometimes I could tell by the end of the cycle if I was going to overshot my HP, therefore I would quickly eat a rock cake before the special attack was to be done, and therefore I would be under the 20% mark that a Phoenix Necklace needs to activate on. As well, I spent a few hours in getting a Gnome token in order to possibly get that extra minute or two if I would need it inside the boss fight for the 10 extra food slots the Gnome delivers you. But unfortunately, Chessbra failed to mention that this actually stalls your character entirely, and well, I couldn't even sip my Zami Brew to activate my Phoenix Necklace the one time I thought I had this kill after wasting so much EXP. Chessbra. So from here, I re-strategized a bit to not even have to use a Gnome token entirely. So I did this by actually adding less Phoenix Necklaces, less Zami Brews, but also a little bit of Guthix Rest to the end of my inventory. This would allow me, once Serene was under 300 HP, to deal with the 4 times healing spawns it would do during one of its special attacks, and therefore do more DPS during this phase, which would typically last longer as the kill goes on. So the worst part about this boss wasn't that you couldn't recoil it, venom it, poison it, cannon it, or even use a rock cake in some instances on it, but it was the 4 times EXP rate you would get every time you attempt to kill it. So unfortunately, this bad RNG did hit me a couple times, and I saw myself not doing enough damage, therefore I would just let myself die because I had no teleports out. As well, I had the Gnome token thing happen earlier, so I had leveled from 43 to now 45 combat, and soon I would level yet again to 46 if I got more bad RNG, or Chessbra tells me to use a Gnome token again. So let's stay 45 combat and let's make this thing happen. And because I want stat boost and the maximum inventory before going into the boss, I'm going to have Sam IRL here as my pack mule trading me over the supplies I need. Just kidding. Of course it's going to be the #1 pack mule doing this job. Chessbra. And just like that, we've completed Song of the Elves at the lowest combat I believe to be possible, and all within the same weekend of release. Well, a little bit of a funny story here. Mod Acorn decided to give me an Orb of Oculus on my main because I didn't have access to this area on my Firekeep accounts. And basically after she left, I logged in on my level 45, and these people literally thought I was her because of the combat level of this account. So as crazy as it sounds, I'm sort of breaking the rules even though I'm just literally standing here. Once again, this was probably the most theory crafting and obscure mechanics I've ever put into one singular video. So if you enjoyed the video, a subscription to my channel is greatly appreciated. Also, Chessbra wanted me to shout out his Twitter for once, so I'll put that in the description below. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you next time on Lower the Better. And remember, vote Rendi.